Welcome back to the Legal Weekly Wine. We are here talking about the week's hottest legal topics. And this week, they are hot. We have Trump at the center of both of them. We are not trying to pick on former President Donald Trump, but he happens to be the top of the legal news this week in two matters. The first, we have the superseding indictment through Washington, D.C. This is the United States District Court for the District of Columbia regarding election interference. This week, Special Prosecutor Jack Smith refiled an indictment, did a new one to replace the old one. We're going to talk about what that is, what it means, how it happens, how can he do that, and does it fit with the Supreme Court's recent decision from this summer regarding presidential immunity. So we're going to talk about that. That is hot legal news. The second hot legal topic of this week that we are going to focus on in this episode is the Arlington Cemetery issue. There was an incident there. There are facts flying, allegations flying about the facts regarding this incident. But what we're going to do is focus on the legality of it. Let's look at the laws, the rules, what the basis of complaint is here, and what it could be going forward. We're also going to mention some other things happening in the news. We're going to mention the vice presidential, I guess it's the Kamala Harris's interview, and also some Truth Social posts that former President Trump has been posting. So all of these, I swear, are going into legal issues. We're going to wrap them up by talking through those. My name is Virginia Tehrani. I'm the host of the Legal Weekly Wine and the CEO of The Law Unscripted, which is hosting this program and podcast, as well as a supplemental bar review. Those are found on thelawunscripted.com. I am joined on the program by my co-hosts and fellow members of The Law Unscripted, and Chelsey Rogers is one of them, as well as one of the attorneys in Tehrani Law LLC that we both work in, because you never need a lawyer till you do. Welcome, Chelsey.
Hey, I'm glad to be here.
Perfect. And our third co-host is the esteemed Dr. John Weil from the Middle Tennessee State University Honors College. He is the dean there. He is an expert of political science, the Constitution, the amending process, and constitutional law, among other things. But we're privileged and pleased to have him, as well as another member of The Law Unscripted and a co-host of the Legal Weekly Wine. Welcome back.
Thank you.
All right, so we've got to show our merchandise. We are selling merchandise finally. I'm so excited. We've mentioned it before. We're wearing the shirts. All this time Chelsey and I have been wearing Tehrani Law shirts. It's the same color. We have very similar logos. That's on purpose. But the Law Unscripted finally has its own shirt. So Chelsey and I are wearing those with the Law Unscripted logo. They are available for sale on thelawunscripted.com, as well as some other funny legal sayings and offshoot legal sayings. I've got the shirt that I wore last time, which is my favorite because of how much I love coffee, which is I plead the fifth cup of coffee. We have others on there. We have a tumbler that says, allegedly, this is coffee. We've got some cute shirts of in my lawyer era. We have one that says, live, laugh, litigate. That's another one of my favorites. But check those out for some fun merchandise. And because this is the Legal Weekly Wine, a part of it, most of us are going to drink some wine. I have pulled a fun one, so I'm going to go first. I thought this was an especially appropriate episode. We've done the 19 crimes before, right? We've done quite a few of those. One of my favorites has been the Snoop Dogg one. Mm-hmm. And with the Olympics having just finished, we had a lot of Snoop Dogg there. And we also had some Martha Stewart, who is a convicted criminal. And in talking about crimes and federal crimes, I brought in Martha's Shard.
Perfect. Incredible.
So I am going to be drinking some Martha's Shard by 19 Crimes. They also have one or two for Snoop. They're hilarious to me, and they actually taste good. So that's what I'm drinking today in honor of today's episode. Chelsey, what about you?
back to the classic, my favorite boxed Franzia
Ooh.
wine. Nobody is surprised. That hefty pour also.
Appropriate for this episode, honestly.
That's what I think. But Dr. Vile, did I see that you had Coca-Cola instead of Pepsi today?
No.
Oh,
Okay.
Oh, look at that.
Brought it
Caught
from
it.
home.
She
Don't
knows
tell
more
the
than-
authorities.
We are
On all
secret.
Pepsi campus.
you are. You are violating the Pepsi campus rules.
Well, I think if I pay for it myself and bring it on, I can do it.
So funny. Yeah. Okay. So Coca-Cola today, we're finally getting some of that. Hilarious that it was
shocked.
Chelsey who recognized it and not even you.
Well, it developed in Georgia, didn't it?
Yes, it did. Actually, the guy who invented it is buried in the cemetery in Columbus, Georgia.
Yeah.
Look at
I
that.
mean, it's surprising it doesn't have a peach flavor, but
You
anyway,
would think so, right?
maybe that's a hidden ingredient.
Oh,
The secret sauce.
Yeah.
maybe.
No,
I
it was
did-
so shocking. I saw him take a sip and I said, "Oh my goodness."
That's
Alert
a
the press.
red label. All right. Well, cheers, everybody. And honestly, it is great to have everyone listening. Grab a glass of your favorite whatever to join us on this happy hour as we discuss these two hot and big and heavy legal topics. Cheers, everyone. All right. So I'm going to say at the outset that I have very strong opinions today.
You never.
I really try to play the neutral. I really do. And especially on this program, I like to give the legal analysis. I like for all of us to give a legal analysis, and I try to stay away as much as possible from impassioned personal feelings. I'm going to try not to let them all slip out, but I'm afraid you might hear one or two when we get to some of these topics. So just be forewarned. Dr. Vile, how are you feeling about these topics? I don't know that Dr. Vile has feelings. I feel that I think that when I think of you, I think you're all logic and all facts and all education, that you put your feelings aside. So that's how I'm envisioning this.
That was how I tried to teach my classes.
And you did
And
well.
raise my children, if you'll remember.
Oh, yes.
I don't think you
Being
guys
one of
ever
them.
know who I have been voted for.
Really?
I think we did.
Well, a lot of times I would say I was voting for the left-handed one, and you'd go out and research it, and they were both left-handed that year. Or
yes.
So funny.
Yes, I think it was fairly obvious throughout growing up, but you never did specifically say. You always encouraged us to investigate ourselves. We always watched everything that you watched so that we could form
I'm
our own
sorry.
opinion.
Your poor mother suffered through
She still has.
2 weeks of conventions. She was so relieved that Friday, I could tell.
When they were done.
Yes.
She's the one drinking wine for our program.
Well, probably needs it.
All right, Chelsey, how are your feelings? We don't normally talk about the emotions much on this show, but ultimately, how are you feeling about today's topics?
I'll tell you, because I always show my emotions on this podcast. So I'm so glad we have two principled people and me over here with my big, loud emotions and feelings about it.
We love you.
I know. I think actually out of sort of our more recent topics, I'm less impassioned about these ones than I think I have been in the ones that we've come up with.
Really?
What I'm most passionate about is, truthfully, I never want to talk about Trump again. I think I've been saying that for 2 years at this point, but I mean it so deeply. I'm so ready for him to be irrelevant. I'm so ready for it.
It is interesting. Of all of the, we've taped almost 80 episodes now for the Legal Weekly Wine. And I will say, in looking back at them, it's been at least a solid third, at
Yes.
least, that have
I'm
included
laughing.
him.
I remember, I can't tell you which one it was, but I was still in law school. I had not graduated from law school when I said it the first time. I'm tired of talking about Trump. And I remember we're sitting at that little table and here we are all this time later. These topics, I'm not super surprised by either of them. And I don't know, maybe I'm just less impassioned about these. Maybe I'm so over it.
And I tell you what, if you're in Georgia, you're going to be hearing a lot from Trump and from Harris.
You're a swing
Oh,
state.
You're
my
it's
goodness.
clear you're one of the swing states.
Yes, I've gotten more research poll text
Mhm.
and campaigning texts than ever before in my life, even being in Georgia and having always voted in Georgia.
Well, and Harris was there this week, right? In Savannah, started a bus tour.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then Trump was here. I don't know, my time's running together. Recently, it was a week ago, maybe-ish.
Well, I noticed Harris made a point of how many times she had been to Georgia during her vice presidency.
And she said, what, 17? I even remember this.
It was quite a few.
Yeah.
And it's one of those states, and I'm glad you've mentioned that, because even in the indictment, right, the superseding indictment that we're going to talk about, Georgia is listed. There are 7 states that are listed as these battleground states from the 2020 election that Trump said we need them overturned, or there was fraud regarding it. So there's all these issues. And the 7 states are Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, where we've seen them, especially Trump has been in Michigan a lot lately, Nevada, New Mexico, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. They're coming for you, states. Those are the states.
Well, and that's where from 2020 that they had all of the issues. We had Brian Raffensperger here in Georgia, who's the Secretary of State. Now we have Governor Kemp still, who has said that he's not concerned about any fraud in the election system. We've also had some recent stuff in Georgia about how they have opened things up for people who poll workers and other election officials, that if they feel like something needs to be investigated, sort of putting a timeout on certifying, ratifying the results.
Yeah, I mean, Georgia is even the center of another indictment. I mean, we have Georgia that's been the center of the Dominion voting cases.
Yeah.
Dominion voting systems cases, the defamation cases, where Trump and his team were found liable for defaming Dominion voting.
Some of the poll workers too, or
exactly the poor poll workers. There was the 2 women who were there who have had their own suits and won of defamation. Yeah. And so that is all Georgia. We've got the huge indictments in Georgia that have now been put on hold because of personal investigation into the prosecutor.
And to be clear, none of these states, all of them, there were cases filed.
Correct.
And in none of them, I mean, I think in Georgia, if I remember, there was an allegation that something like 10,000 dead people had voted.
Yes.
When it came down to it, they were able to find 2. And there were similar results in the other states. So, it's not necessarily that these states are more ill managed or the voting is peculiar there. It's just the Trump team is looking at what states can we pick up that would move us from, I believe it was 232 electoral votes to 270 votes, and Georgia happened to be one of them.
Right.
And it looks like it's a real toss up again. The other thing that's interesting is your neighboring state of North Carolina has not appeared to be in play, but some people think it possibly could. And there's even a little discussion as to whether Florida might be in play. I don't think that it is, but if I were Harris, I would go down there a couple times just so the other side would have to spend some money making sure that they were still on board. So we will see.
And I'm glad you mentioned the voting issues in Georgia, because that's part of the lawsuit. We're going to come back to the mainstays of the lawsuit, but the indictment. This is actual criminal charges, so it's an indictment versus a lawsuit. I apologize. But in the indictment, in both the original and the superseding indictment, Jack Smith is saying, and this is specifically with regard to Georgia, Georgia's section picks up with paragraph 24 on page 10. And in it, in paragraph 26, it's saying on December 3rd, co-conspirator 1 orchestrated a presentation to a judiciary subcommittee of the Georgia State Senate with the intention of misleading state senators into blocking the ascertainment of legitimate electors. And they're saying during the presentation they did certain things that were fraudulent. And one of them is falsely claimed, this is for Georgia, that here's Dr. Weil, your statement, that more than 10,000 dead people voted in Georgia. But here's what comes next. That afternoon, a senior advisor to the defendant, who's Donald Trump, told the defendant's chief of staff through text messages, quote, "Just an FYI, a campaign lawyer and his team verified that the 10,000 plus supposed dead people voting in Georgia is not accurate. It was alleged in co-conspirator one's hearing today." And then the quote ends, but the indictment continues with the sentence. The senior advisor clarified that he believed the actual number was 12. So this is what we're getting, these allegations. So let's talk about this indictment. And we are going to put at the end of this video, we're going to put a link to the video we did regarding the initial indictment, because we did do one where we broke down the initial indictment, who these people were, what was happening. We broke it down almost line for line. So we're going to put an attachment to that video as well as in the description. Chelsey, do you remember the main, and I know it's been a hot minute since we've done the DC one. Do you remember the main idea of the DC indictment?
4 separate counts, is it right?
Yes.
Okay.
Very good.
Let's see what I can remember off the top of my dome.
It's been a while.
It's like election interference, essentially. And I don't know what the 4 count. I know it was 4 things, and it essentially amounts to interfering with the election. Is that right?
You're absolutely right. You know, we've all been focusing on New York and Georgia and even Florida with the dismissed case. Yeah. But you're absolutely right. The DC indictment comes down to conspiracies to defraud the U.S. and obstruct justice and the institution of the presidential election votes and elected official Joe Biden as president. So the 4 counts, we've got conspiracy to defraud the United States as one of those counts, and that's knowingly combine, conspire, confederate, and agree with co-conspirators, known and unknown to the grand jury, to defraud the United States by using dishonesty, fraud, and deceit to impair, obstruct, and defeat the lawful federal government function by which the results of the presidential election are collected, counted, and certified by the federal government. So that's count 1. And let me make sure I won't read them all off. That one I thought was especially sensitive and needed the full wording. I always like to go back to the wording if we can. The other 3 are at the back, so they wait until page 34 to do the other 3 indictments. So count 2 is from on or about November 13th, 2020 through on or about January 7th. The defendant, this is conspire to corruptly obstruct and impede an official proceeding, that is certification of the electoral vote. And then count 3 is obstruction or attempt to obstruct the certificate. So conspiracy to obstruct the electoral vote. The attempt to obstruct the electoral vote is the 3rd count. And count 4 is conspiracy to basically to prohibit the free exercise and enjoyment of right and privileges secured by the United States citizen to have their vote counted. So those are the counts. They're basically saying that illegally, according to actual federal laws, they're citing federal statutes, that former President Trump did knowingly conspire and attempt to obstruct the election through fraud and deceit. And in this indictment, in both of them, they continue to allege facts of there was false information. The defendant and his co-conspirators knew the information was false and continued to put it out to the United States citizens and to specific states. Which are these states? These 7 states. And it goes state by state as to, in this state, the defendant and his co-conspirators did this. In this state, they did that. Dr. Vial, I want to go to you as a little bit continuation of the summary, and then we're going to get to the specific differences. How do you feel that the indictment has done? What kind of job has it done, and Jack Smith in writing it, in laying out a case for this crime? Do you feel like it's compelling?
Well, it's not quite as compelling. as it would have been before Trump versus United States. So basically, in that decision, the court tried to distinguish between official and unofficial acts. So the greater emphasis that you see in this, as opposed to the earlier indictments, is they've stripped out any conversations that Trump had, like with his attorney general or would-be attorney general.
People in the government.
Right. And then they've made a point of every time they said this of understand it's not the responsibility of the president to obstruct an election. It's not the responsibility of the president to tell the vice president that he should obstruct an election, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. It's not
So
an
some of it
official
is semantic.
act.
Pardon?
It's not an official act to commit a crime, is basically how they've rephrased the language.
Right. But what is lacking are, if you kept some of the conversations that they know he had with actual governmental employees, some of that seems to go very directly to motive and toward what knowledge he actually had when he took the actions that he did.
Chelsey, why is this language now excluded? Why is Jack Smith taking out these conversations with government officials?
Yeah, this is the part that I'm maybe the most impassioned about, is that these conversations, essentially mostly with the DOJ, under what seems to be the ruling and the holding in the presidential immunity case that just came out by the Supreme Court, like, what, a month ago? It feels like a lifetime, but that was like a month, maybe?
Right. A month, 2 months, not long.
That seems clear that those conversations would be considered official acts, because it's a conversation between Trump and the DOJ, unfortunately.
And if it's an official act, according to this decision, the Supreme Court decision,
Absolute immunity.
There's no immunity, and you can't admit that evidence into the court to prove
The other
the
acts.
unofficial acts.
And that's where Amy Coney Barrett had sort of, in her concurrence, said, oh, maybe not go that far. But it seems very straightforward that according to that Supreme Court ruling, that he can do that. That's totally fine.
Yeah, it's really, that I think is the hardest for me as a trial attorney, where I'm being told by the Supreme Court, okay, so you can't prosecute him for official actions. They haven't defined all of them. They've given a few, but they haven't defined it. And you can't use that evidence. Even, I understand you can't use it to present a crime if they're saying it's not a crime, but it's hard for me to say, okay, I can't use that evidence at all to prove another crime. And that's where I think it's hard.
And in U.S. versus Nixon, the U.S. Supreme Court made it very clear that a grand jury had the right to every man's evidence. And this seems to be an exclusion from that, and a very serious one in my judgment.
Yeah. So my question to the two of you, and we're going to keep talking about this because there's so much to unpack here. Okay, so first a statement and then a question. The statement is there is a superseding indictment, and the effect of this means, yes, Jack Smith can file a new indictment, one that superseding means it replaces. That's the basic language. It replaces.
And stop a minute. Did he not actually, did he recall the jury? Because that's my understanding.
A new grand jury.
An entirely new grand jury.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
He basically started back from scratch.
Yes.
To avoid the implication, well, the first jury, the jury, they did it again, but they were still influenced by what they knew.
Correct.
So he really, if people were complaining about how much money he's spending it because they keep
Supreme
making
Court
him do
made him.
things over.
Right. So he's replaced it. He's basically erased the original, put in a new one. He is allowed to do that because Trump is not being tried for both. He's only being tried on the new one. And he never was tried. A jury was never sat to hear a pettit jury, a trial jury was never sat to hear the evidence. Grand jury, a different grand jury can be called. So the old one's out, the new one's in. And my question to the two of you is, should Jack Smith have kept it and actually made a challenge to the Supreme Court decision by having going through the trial, having the decisions through the trial court of what's an official act, what's an unofficial act, making those on the record with all of the objections, with final decisions by the trial court that he could then appeal to the Supreme Court. Should he have done that? Or do you think that this was the smarter move of saying, okay, the Supreme Court decision exists, I'm going to try to prevent issues before they start?
Not to sound like a lawyer, but I think it depends.
And that's one of our favorite shirts too,
Yes.
is it depends, a lawyer's favorite answer.
I mean, I think it really would depend on like what the end goal is, right? I think what he chose to me says that his end goal is he would like a conviction, right? He wants this conviction. And I think what he did is the best way to get it, the quickest. But I mean, as someone who's interested in the law, I'd be really curious to see this go all the way up. But I don't really think that was the intent. I think it was to modify it to end up going to trial and getting a conviction. I think that was it in the
And
intent.
we're not going to get a conviction prior to the election.
No, there's
my God, no way.
Not on
it's
this.
2
Now-
months before the election.
Now, it's a little less clear what's going to happen in the New York case. You know, I guess it depends on whether an official action involves hush money to porn stars.
Right.
You know, is that an official or unofficial action? I think that how many lawyers would it take to decide on something like that?
Clearly too many. Yeah.
What happened to common sense? What happened to common sense, guys?
Apparently America likes to pay attorneys, which is keeping us employed. But
You know what? Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting as an attorney and my own personality. I think I would have been inclined to keep the original indictment and say, you know what? Let's try it.
I said what I said.
Based on these decisions, let's have a ruling by the trial court. Let's hash out what is an unofficial act and what is an official act, and let's put it in writing. I think that, you know, my own reasoning would have been that. But I think he did, I agree with you, Chelsey, in the effort to make the best possible case, criminal case with the least complications and least interference with things that would have been objected. I think it's already hard for a jury to understand. It's hard for me as an attorney and someone who knows political science and the Constitution to understand this indictment, much less trying to convince 12 ordinary people beyond a reasonable doubt for a unanimous decision on these facts. So I think he made the better course of action choice. But my own personal, I was like, let's, you know, go to the end.
I'm with you. I want to
this,
see it
what
play
happens.
out, right? Like, let's play it out. Let's see what happens. But I think he is trying to simplify things as much as possible, which makes sense.
And this will probably expedite the process, even though, again, it's, you know, and if Trump, I mean, I think it's pretty clear now that if Trump is elected, I don't think, now I'm not sure the civil cases I think could go forward, but I don't think the criminal cases would go forward during his tenure. And,
Correct.
you know, that frankly, that may be a major reason that he's running. 4 more years of immunity, you know, testimony gets stale, memories fail.
He may be dead. I mean, he's old.
Well, that's right.
I mean, hey, he may be able to hire hitmen and just, you know, make sure they're from the DOJ, and then he's good
Well,
to
as
go.
long as he
Official
does it as an
acts.
official act.
Exactly.
If exactly like you're both saying is use it as an official act, apparently through the DOJ, it would be, according to the Supreme Court decision, if he uses the DOJ, then that's an official act. So don't hire private actors seems to be the idea. And with that, that's the most fascinating thing to me about this new indictment is Jack Smith has used the language in the case that the Supreme Court said. And I've highlighted a couple of times where he has specifically said in paragraph 14, he's said, the defendant continued to make false claims nonetheless with deliberate disregard for the truth, including through his Twitter account, okay? Now, listen to this. Throughout the conspiracies, although the defendant sometimes used his Twitter account to communicate with the public as president about official actions, this is new, right? This is Supreme Court language, official action. So he's saying, okay, sometimes he did use it, but in this case he says, quote, he also regularly used it for personal purposes.
Yeah.
Including to spread knowingly false claims of election fraud, exhort his supporters to travel to Washington, D.C. on January 6th, pressure the vice president to misuse his ceremonial role in the certification proceeding, and leverage the events at the Capitol on January 6th to unlawfully retain power. So what he's done is he's used the Supreme Court decision to say, okay, sometimes the president put out presidential tweets. All right. Sometimes he uses it to inform the public, to make sure that they know specific things. But in this capacity, he's saying these 4 things are unofficial acts. So if he's talking about, tweeting about, relaying knowingly false claims about election fraud, if he's pressuring the vice president to misuse his roles and commit illegal acts, if he's exhorting supporters to travel to the election proceeding on January 6th, then if he's leveraging his events to unlawfully retain power, he's saying in this indictment, these are unofficial acts. The president, as commander-in-chief, this is not the indictment, this is me, essentially as the commander-in-chief, he cannot be trying to break the law. He can only be trying to enforce and uphold the law and the Constitution. So he's being very clear and very specific in this indictment to separate and say, okay, Supreme Court, if you're going to say that, then I'm going to define unofficial acts as anything that knowingly subverts the law and the legal process and the Constitution of the United States. And he's also very clear in the indictment to say at the very beginning, he had a right, and this is paragraph 3, the defendant had a right, like every American, to speak publicly about the election, and even to claim, this is interesting to me, even claim falsely that there had been outcome determinative fraud during the election and that he had won. So he says, look, he has a right to do this, but then there's what he doesn't have a right to do. And I like also that in the indictment, he specifically, and Dr. Vial, I think you'll like this too, he specifically references how the Electoral College works, what the Constitution says. He has a paragraph set up called the federal government function. This is how we work as the United States. And it's paragraph 10. He goes through the Constitution and the Electoral Count Act, the federal law enacted in 1887, which Dr. Vial, you've referenced multiple times on this show, including how does the Electoral College work? And what he continues to say is it's state laws. The electoral process is highly relevant to state law, that through state laws, each of the 50 states in the District of Columbia chose to select their electors based on the popular vote in the state. So here he's saying repeatedly, the president doesn't have anything to do with state law.
Yeah.
And it's very clear that the vice presidential role is a ceremonial role.
Yes.
It's or maybe even a ministerial. I'm not sure what the better legal term would be, but it's not his discretion to say, here's who I'd like to remain on as vice president under Donald Trump, so I'm going to certify this election. He doesn't have that power.
He's just reading them out based on Constitution and this ECA law. Right. He's performing his duty. And that's one of the other things that Jack Smith is saying in this indictment is it is an unofficial act, not a presidential act, to try to persuade the vice president to violate the law and the Constitution. That the president should be encouraging the vice president to uphold the law and Constitution. So that's not an official act. We even get, there's facts in this, and it seems to be facts very well documented, where Jack Smith is saying, here's where the election fraud was discounted. Here's where they proved, here's where all of these cases throughout the 50 states and jurisdictions were dismissed as not founded, that these alleged facts are untrue. And it's saying even on November 13th, the defendant's campaign attorneys conceded in court, this is in Arizona, that he had lost the vote count in the state of Arizona.
Well, and he also makes it clear that Trump was apparently behind this attempt to have false slates of electors filed. And in some cases, apparently lied to the people who signed their names. They were
Correct.
told, you're signing your name so that if we're able to prove in court
If we
that
win.
we actually won, then we don't have, it'll
we'll
be
use
on
your-
record that it's already, and so there's deception going on there, which again, clearly would not be an official presidential act.
Yeah. And I like that they included, for Arizona specifically, they talk about the Speaker of the Arizona House of Representatives, who allegedly, according to this indictment, Donald Trump and co-conspirator one, who we believe is Rudy Giuliani, called and kept saying, hey, there's all this fraud in your state. You need to recertify. You need to dismiss this. And according to this indictment, the poor guy kept saying, where's the evidence?
Yeah.
And they kept saying, oh, we'll get it to you. And finally, it says on December 4th, this is paragraph 21, the Arizona House Speaker issued a public statement that said, in part, quote, no election is perfect, and if there were evidence of illegal votes or an improper count, then Arizona law provides a process to contest the election, a lawsuit under state law. But the law does not authorize the legislature to reverse the results of an election. And it goes on later to say, he says, I cannot and will not entertain a suggestion that we violate current law to change the outcome of a certified election.
And what's very clear, I believe, both particularly in Arizona and in Georgia, and maybe a couple of the other states, but these were Republicans. These were people who had openly supported Trump,
Absolutely.
wanted Trump to win, and would undoubtedly have profited politically had he won.
Yes.
So, what is it? A statement against interest?
Yes.
That's basically
Evidence
what this
rules.
is. I mean, these are people. These are not, these were not Democrats who favored Biden. These are Trump's own people saying, much as we'd like to wish it to be, Trump was not reelected.
Correct. And I like that you mentioned that. I also had pulled that out as, was it Georgia or Arizona? It was one of those two that did specifically state, I voted for Trump. I want Trump to win, but I can't make him win if he didn't, just because I want him to. So I agree that that's in here as well. And even in, it says for Arizona, the false claims that 36,000 non-citizens had voted in Arizona. And in everything in the indictment, it continues to say these were debunked. These were untrue. It was proven that this was not the case, as well as the alleged 10,000 dead in Arizona, which was apparently 12.
Atlanta, wasn't it?
I don't know.
Georgia,
I know, but I don't. Yeah.
If you want to gain immortality, they used to say, get buried in Chicago. You can continue voting.
Yeah. And so, and then here's the Georgia, the alleged ballot stuffing. And they even bring out the defendant's tweets, right?
Yeah.
These are the, again, quote, unofficial acts that Jack Smith is alleging. These are unofficial, not official, that he's saying, quote, wow, blockbuster testimony taking place right now in Georgia. Ballot stuffing by Dems when Republicans were forced to leave the large counting room. Plenty more coming, but this alone leads to an easy win of the state. And then it's saying in the indictment on December 4th, the very next day, right, they were debunked. And
in Georgia, there were so many lawsuits that his team had filed just to basically make the headlines, and within a week or two had withdrawn the complaints because they knew they were frivolous.
Right. And the Georgia Secretary of State's chief operating officer made a tweet on that next day stating the 90-second video of election workers at State Farm Arena purporting to show fraud was watched in its entirety, hours, and then it listed a state investigators, shows normal ballot processing. Here is the fact check on it. So there's a lot of this throughout. I like the idea and the fact that Jack Smith put so many details in. I think it's fascinating that he continued, that he specifically at the beginning said all these acts through private citizens, through
Yes.
private parties. He took out any official parties through the Department of Justice who would have been, according to the initial indictment, co-conspirator number 4 was officially taken out. And that was a Justice Department official who worked on civil matters and who, with the defendant, attempted to use the Justice Department to open sham election crime investigations and influence state legislatures with knowingly false claims of election fraud. We believe that that was Jeffrey Clark. It's not in the indictment. He's gone from the new one. All official acts, according to the Supreme Court case, have been taken out with regard to the DOJ. So will it be enough without the public actions? I don't know. I think it's interesting. I'm absolutely fascinated with this part. To me, it's hard to look at these and say, wow, if they really do prove, if they have all this evidence, if they really do prove these, it seems to be, to me, that they would be able to prove 4 crimes, which is defrauding, conspiring to and defrauding the United States citizens and voters of taking away their votes. And it's especially shocking to me. This is the same week where former President Trump, made an allegation that he won California. Have you all seen that?
No, I haven't.
I haven't, but be so for real. Be so for real right now.
I laughed out loud. I thought I was reading The Onion. Right? I thought that was what I must have said, but I think it was in his, don't quote me on this, but I think it was in his interview with Dr. Phil this week that was published, where he was claiming, we all know that it's something about I won California. There were 3 million votes. I won by 3 million votes or something like that. I mean, it was so shocking and so wrong. Of all of the states to choose that you won, California is not the one to choose.
It's a big one, so
it's big.
you might as well go for the big one.
But we're talking about a heavily entrenched Democratic state, not Republican. So that was interesting. It seems to me, as an attorney and especially as a prior prosecutor, these are hard for me to see in an election. Where I've always been a goody-goody. Dr. Weil can tell you that. I've always been very, very much a goody-goody and probably too much of a rule follower in my life. But it's hard for me to say, I'm going to elect someone who's been proved by multiple juries to have committed crimes. We've already got the New York finding that he's guilty of 33 felonies. 34. I can't remember.
34.
That could get also upset. I mean, they have to go through there and decide, did they use evidence of official acts?
Correct.
So that's somewhat in question.
It is
still.
in question, but based on the evidence they had without
Right.
the Supreme Court ruling, if he were
convicted.
a simple layperson, he would, he's fully convicted. He's convicted even as the former president, but there's just the question of, can the evidence have been used against him? Then we've got the issues of E. Jean Carroll, the defamation cases, all of the fact that even through this indictment, they're citing all of these cases were dropped of defrauding, of false election results. I mean, it's hard for me to think of voting for a criminal or a potential criminal, someone who is, I'm saying criminal in the sense that he was convicted.
He's a criminal right now. And
New
until that
York.
changes, that is true. He will be,
Correct.
none of this will change before November 6th. So he will be a criminal then, right?
And the
Is that not
caution-
true?
The caution that people need to know is not all sources are created equal.
Correct.
And some
Yeah.
Twitter and tweets, they can be fun, but they're not, if you're using them for entertainment value, possibly, but if you're using for informational value, they're probably less than 0 because a lot of them are going to be just outright falsehoods. There's no real penalty. Now, I have noticed that True Social has apparently gone from 6 billion to 2 billion in valuation.
Oh,
or
it's
a little over
dropped
2.
dramatically.
And if Trump is not reelected, my guess is that there will, he's the main attraction on, as I understand it, on that. So, but people can essentially, you can allege anything.
Yes,
And I know this upsets you, Virginia. It should upset anyone.
it does.
But the postings suggesting that, people have gotten to the top by sleeping their way there, and obviously it's always women, that this claim is made about, because of the way libel laws work, you're not going to probably win a case, but there's no validity at all. I mean, there's no
Right.
evidence. It's just outright slander. And, if I can recommend a lot of books for people to read, they don't have anything to do and they feel like they have to watch Truth Social. There are a lot of really enlightening things that one can do rather than spend one's time
You're
there.
right. And you're absolutely right. It is so personally offensive to me and shocking, these posts suggesting, and these, I guess they're called truths, retruths instead of tweets, that Trump is posting from his account with a photograph of Kamala and Hillary Clinton together with such offensive language about essentially that, they use their blowjobs to get to the top in different ways. It is personally shockingly offensive as a woman. Chelsey, you're smiling.
I
a
mean,
lot.
we talked about this a little bit before. I have some thoughts on it. I think it's so tired, right? Like this idea that women are sleeping to the top is like boring. Give me something new. Be creative. You're being lame. But also, if women could sleep their way to the top, there would be more women at the top, y'all. Like if it was that easy, if you could just pass a California bar by, sleeping with somebody, that'd be fantastic. Let me know how I can be attorney general. Give me their number, send it my way. I'd prefer that over taking the bar personally, but that was not available for me. And that's my funny bit on it. But truthfully, why is it, there are women sleeping their way to the top? Not we have men in positions of power who are using sexual gratification to get people places. Maybe that's the better framing of that.
Right. I mean, let's look at Bill Clinton. If we're going to accuse anyone of sexual favors or using sexual anything to get to different places.
And what did she get out of it except a lifetime of ridicule?
Let's talk about two male presidents we've had of John F. Kennedy and Bill Clinton, who have been the most sexualized male presidents.
How about Warren G. Harding?
There is someone we don't know, but Dr. Weil does. I mean,
okay, several different mistresses. Yes.
So why is it only
Stormy Daniels slept with, Donald Trump and all she got was $100,000. Like, I'm sorry. What was it? 130?
Yeah, it's horrible. And truly, I mean, my poor sister listened to me rant today. But it is hard on a personal level to see the attacks from the Republican Party against women, especially of using sexual innuendos about them and how they got to power, how they would be on an equal footing with men. J.D. Vance's slanders against mothers who don't have biological children. Those who have stepchildren like I do, adopted children.
I think he's walked that back a bit, has he not?
Not much.
Well,
A little bit. His wife has claimed that it was only those who can't have, who intentionally weren't having children of their own. But it's
so
hard
not you,
to walk
just
that.
me.
It's hard to walk that back, and especially when more is coming out. There's another one with an educational leader who he was saying, why are you even talking? Essentially, you're not a mother, and she had stepchildren. So it's hard.
Well, it's like telling a Catholic priest that he can't counsel a family because he's never been married. I mean, that's
Right.
That's or a nun. This was considered something noble to do. To make that sacrifice. So.
Right. So it's hard in looking at this of, I'm so personally offended. It's hard to look past those things to the actual, politics or policies of them. So let's talk about the other thing that I'm a little bit riled up about. But it is the hottest legal topic. Let's talk about Arlington Cemetery. Do either of you want to give us a quick fact or summary of what we think are the facts that have happened or come out of this Arlington Cemetery incident this week?
Yeah. So earlier this week, I'll try to give the facts, then we can dive into stuff. Earlier this week, former President Trump and his crew went to a wreath hanging ceremony for the anniversary of 13 soldiers who were killed. What was it? I just had it in my notes. It was Abby. Yeah. In Afghanistan, but it was Abby something. I don't have the note. I think Gate. I think it is. Don't quote me. But I think it's it. Anyways, he was there for that at the request of one of the Gold Star families. And he attended that with his camera crew and his crew, and they were informed before time at Arlington National Cemetery, that there were areas that they were allowed to film and take pictures and areas that they were not. It seems that they attempted to take some sort of footage or pictures in an area when they were not supposed to. A worker at Arlington National Cemetery got into some sort of altercation. We have a sort of he said, she said on what actually happened. It seems that some people are claiming there was a physical altercation. Some people are saying it was just a heated exchange of words. Either way, the police were called. The employee declined to press charges. I think personally, see, I can't even get through a full fact story before I have my opinion. I'm just saying, I don't think they called the police for a heated exchange of words. That's my 2 cents. So there is an incident report that has been filed, but the employee declined to press charges. So as far as the Army is concerned, case closed. But it brought attention to all of these other things. And after his visit, there was a video that was posted on Donald Trump's official TikTok page that is very interesting when you think about it, because it's pictures and videos from that visit to Arlington, but it's a voiceover. So it's not like he's giving a stump speech in Arlington, but I would say it's clearly campaigning. But that does seem to be the hot.
Right, and allegedly
So
the voiceover is some of the stuff he actually said while at the graveside.
Yes. So we have this sort of thing because that could possibly violate federal law. And so that's where it becomes this legal issue. Yes. I think if the altercation hadn't happened, it might not have drawn attention to this particular visit on the scale that it now has. But because of the altercation, and now we have this video and the Army issuing a statement, we have entered in a whole new territory of, did he violate federal law when he created a campaign video after visiting the cemetery? Who knows? And we can dive into that.
And what's fascinating, both of you know that I regularly contribute to our First Amendment encyclopedia.
Yes.
And there's
which is free online through the Middle Tennessee State University website.
1,800 entries or so. We get lots and lots of hits. But one of the fascinating things about it is this is not a rule that was just applied to Trump.
No. There's
an overall rule that you're not going to use sacred hallowed space in order to campaign.
Right.
And most observers, including myself, including me, believe that this is a reasonable time, place, and manner restriction. Now, there's
on political speech.
There's one case that initially seems to be on the other side, Snyder versus Phelps, where this leader of the Westboro Baptist Church would go to funerals of military people who had been killed and hold up signs saying that this was God's judgment on America for tolerating homosexuality.
That's right.
And the court ruled that this was a matter of public interest. I mean, as silly as it sounds, this is, if God is punishing us for this, we need to know about it. Yeah. But they didn't do it actually in the funeral. They didn't come into a service and do it. They didn't go to the graveyard and do it.
They were on the public space, on the sidewalks.
And so most people think that a restriction of hallowed space is a reasonable time, place, and manner restriction rather than a content. Right. If somebody's given their life for their here I'm going to repeat a line that Obama used to use, but is particularly appropriate here. We don't have graves marked in the cemetery on the basis of whether they're from a red state or a blue state. They died on behalf of the United States. Yeah. And if you would think if there's, RIP seems to fit here, right? If there's one place where people ought to be able to, and their families ought to be able to go without hearing a demonstration for or against the conflict, this should be it. And frankly, I'm very critical of what happened in Afghanistan. I don't blame Biden for all of it because Trump is the one who announced that we were going to exit so quickly, but it was very poorly executed. It's one of the worst, I think, public is almost as bad as the evacuation years and years ago from Vietnam. So it's a legitimate point of criticism, but don't bring in somebody's dead son or daughter to do it. I mean, have we no shame is nothing
Mhm.
sacred. And this is, again, it's going to blow over. Attention is going to go there. But I don't want the precedent of anybody, somebody comes there, they honor the dead.
Yeah.
Um, and that's what cemeteries, as far as I'm concerned, are for.
And that's interesting because the law, in talking about the law, there are specific laws that apply, federal laws and
Yeah. No
military laws.
partisan, I think it says no partisan presentations is the
Exactly.
verbiage.
It's the Code of Federal Regulation, 553, and this is 32 CFR Part 553.32, and it
C.
says, see, there we go, memorial services and ceremonies at Army National Military Cemeteries will not include partisan political activities. So that's the CFR. Then we go to the Department of the Army itself, right? Who runs Arlington National Cemetery.
And that's when they have the specifics. So this
Yes.
is my question, and maybe I'm misunderstanding. So what the CFR that code section is federal law, but then we sort of get these like internal memos, these policies and procedures that are not necessarily like federal law, right? That is saying the certain sections have different rules, right?
So what they're saying is it's referencing, there's a memorandum for the record that is posted on the Arlington National Cemetery website, and apparently, allegedly, according to the Army and their statement, was provided to Trump and all of his crew who was attending the ceremony. And the very first part says references, and it references 10 USC 7724. Then it references the CFR that we just read. It references the Army General Order 2021-01, and then multiple other codes, mostly military related. And the question is this more of a reference guide? Is it a definitional source? Like, does it define that political activity? How will it be used? But it is very clearly listed in this memorandum, available and given to everyone.
Is that the one from April of 2022?
Let's see. It is indeed.
Okay, I was going to say yes.
And it's saying it's very specific regarding the media. The media has to request film to be able to film. They have to do this prior to arriving. They have to arrange it. And according to the Army's statement that was released, they said, okay, they did arrange, and we allowed some. We allowed a personal photographer, someone representing the family, to be there. But they specifically said they did not allow or approve anyone from the campaign staff to be at the headstone as part of the memorial service, and were specifically directed not to take photographs or video for that purpose. So what Trump's campaign has put out in the media is, we had permission. We had permission. And in my understanding, the permission that they had was from the family. The family whose gravestone they went to said, please come and place the wreath. That's amazing. I'm so glad they did. And it does appear that they had full permission of that family. What they didn't have permission for is to violate the law. So family permission
Were
does
there
not
also some other grave sites
correct.
They got
photographed
posted.
that they did not have permission for?
Correct. And I
Yes.
think that's the saddest part.
It's just like putting these families back through
Right.
the trauma of, who wants somebody arguing politics over the dead child's grave?
Yeah.
Yeah. Or reaching out to them, because now, these normal families have now been contacted by every news outlet to get their hot take on this. And I think it's really sad for me. I saw a quote from one of the sisters whose brother's grave was sort of included in some of this.
Without permission.
Without permission. And she seemed trying to keep sort of more of a neutral take, but I can't imagine how overwhelming that would have been overnight to be contacted by everybody.
Yeah.
And I think that's like why we also had, my understanding is that there were there's like section 60, which is, I think,
Yes.
where the altercation with this employee occurred.
And where
was
the
that
filming occurred, where it wasn't
Yes,
These are
and that's
the
what it was
new
about.
graves,
Right. Yes.
These are recent graves, so it's
from
More
not,
recent,
Iraq and
absolutely.
Afghanistan.
right. It's these are people whose families are still alive. And,
Yes.
Right. And that's one of the families who came out of, we didn't agree to, that's our son's headstone. We didn't agree for that to be taped. And that's the whole idea, Dr. Vile, that you're saying is these are places of honor. These are places of peace. These are places that are not supposed to be disturbed and nationalized. And even in these procedures, they're told if you don't have an appointment, if you don't have permission, if you're not pre-coordinated, if you're not allowed, we will remove you. And it seems to be that this employee was trying to follow the procedure and protocol that they'd all been given been made privy to
Well,
and agreed to.
The worst thing about it, frankly,
Oh, I know what you're saying.
is slamming her as having some kind of mental breakdown
Yes.
or trying to enforce the law.
Yes.
That, anytime somebody starts calling names, and you see it all the time, what is it? Mothers, don't let your boys grow up to be cowboys. It's don't let them grow up to be politicians.
Yeah.
Whatever you do.
Again, but this insult too is like, are we in the 1930s again? Okay, we're just going to call women crazy when they're just they're doing what they're supposed to do. Like, it's like, are we going to call it hysteria again? Like, this is so tired. It is so old and it is so tired.
I agree. And I appreciate your thoughts on that, because that did seem of, are we just going to question mental health because they're women?
Right.
Have we gone so far backwards after how long we've struggled for women's rights? I feel like I'm back in the women's rights movement originally, is just to have a vote again, or is that what I'm going to be doing next? But
it took what till 1872 Minor versus Happersett?
For which
where
part?
women can't vote, but then there's also a case where women originally could not serve as attorneys.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we fought for so long for how much, not me personally, through this, but how far back do we have to go? I agree that was, I think, the most insulting statement of the idea that this woman, because she was a woman, is clearly having a mental health issue. Really? Because she's trying to follow the law and enforce federal
do her
law.
job.
And it seems, there's an actual federal law in the books on this. So it seems to me that Trump's use on his tweet and on these videos of using photographs and videos from Section 60 while he was there in campaign ads. They have been used in campaign ads. So in my mind, what more political party agenda and activity can you get? Isn't that what the law is trying to prevent? And, is there going to be a criminal action? And how many people will cry, oh, we're just trying to prosecute the former president again? Well, it seems, based on the laws that I'm reading, that he might have violated federal law by having his campaign do this.
He has every right to criticize Biden's handling
Absolutely.
of
1000%.
the exit from Afghanistan.
100%.
It was a disaster, in my humble judgment. Although, the person I guess you ought to blame for a terrorist attack is the terrorist rather than something that you don't have to go to Afghanistan to be blown up by a terrorist.
Right.
So, the cause and effect maybe is a little attenuated there.
Yeah. So Chelsey, I'm going to bring it to you. You have a family member who is.
Oh yeah, both of my parents were military. My mom was Army and has served most recently. And like I said, I grew up near Fort Benning, now turned Fort Moore in Columbus, Georgia. And so I had seen the headlines and truthfully earlier this week had just been like, I can't deal with this at the moment. So this morning I decided to really dig in and look at everything. And so I wanted my mom's perspective. So I made her, we're like sitting here, we're both reading everything, looking at everything. And I felt the same way as you. I saw what happened. Which honestly, my personal feelings, the responses, the interviews after where Trump and Vance were asked about this made me dislike them more than anything else that happened in this scenario. The way they talked about it personally was just distasteful, in my opinion.
It's a great word.
Yeah. And I read the law and I was like, I think you can make a legitimate legal argument that what they did and how they then used that footage. Now, if they had never used it and they had just filmed and given the families a picture, I think that's a less clear situation, but it was
So
clearly
much agreed.
used on his official social media pages, what is clearly campaigning to me. However, my mom didn't feel quite as strongly. She actually used this, and we talked about it for a while. So this is a big summary of her opinion. She said, it's distasteful. We both said it gives us the ick, like standing there thumbs upping over a grave, no matter what really the context is. This kind of gives me the ick, right?
Yeah, like, are
But I
you
can
thumbs
say-
upping, yay, they're dead?
Right.
Yay, I'm
But
here.
I
I
have
mean,
to,
what's the
like-
thumbs up for?
Yeah, I have to say, that's not my family member there, and I'm not there having someone lay a wreath on their grave. So I will reserve my judgment for there. The family wanted him there. They wanted to take the picture. That's not my business. Me personally, gives me the ick, but not my business as far as I'm concerned. What I really, in my opinion, the problem really came in on how those pictures and footage were used. That is when I think the violation happened. My mom was just like, this is distasteful. That's not the time or place for any of this. But she was like, I don't know if it's as clear. She didn't feel it was as clear that she violated it. But as a vet, she was like, this is just she hates when people take pictures, like those type of pictures at the graves. She used the word ick too, which she's taking on my vocab. But I think that was her thing of like, it is not even about the violation of the law. It's just a lack of decorum, a lack of professionalism and respect. Like, it's gross.
Yeah.
Virginia, I need to leave this meeting. I hate to do it because I think I wanted to make some comment on the Harris Waltz interview that I thought, it didn't quite live up to the hype in terms of, didn't turn out to be, I think, all that big a deal. She doesn't, as far as I could tell, neither of them made major missteps, although, there were some questions they probably didn't answer adequately. But I got a honors matter that I need to deal with today.
And
so
that is important too. And that's fine. We need to wrap up anyway. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Vile. Chelsey, great to have your thoughts and opinions. Everyone go and investigate yourselves. Look into the matters. As Chelsey, her mom, and I have all done, and Dr. Vile, it is interesting. Have an opinion. Even if you disagree with us, find an opinion of your own. Read and inform yourselves enough to make an opinion, to really look at the matters. These are serious matters that will be affecting our country and who represents our country from here on out. Chelsey, you're always entertaining. Love your spirit and your energy that you bring to this show. Tell your mom thank you, and thank you for letting us use her thoughts and information as well on this show. We love her. We're a huge fan of Mom here. My own mom and your mom. So hi, Mom.
Yes, I know.
Hi to both of us. And Mrs. Rogers, thank you also for getting our tumbler for the allegedly This Is Coffee. Such a huge support. We love this show. We love what you all have to do as audience members. Thank you for our two huge super fans, especially Jared Bailey out there. We appreciate your watching and your commenting. We do love you. Check out our page, thelawunscripted.com. Don't forget to like and subscribe so that you see and hear our podcast each week and can keep up with us. Comment and do that so that others can see it and engage with what's happening legally. Yes, we've got the political side of it, but where is the legal piece? And that's where we come in and step into this wonderful political debate. I'm Virginia Tehrani. This is Chelsey Rogers. Dr. John Vile just hopped off, and we will catch you next time on the Legal Weekly Wine.